Donald Trump had just wrapped up an event in New York City, a benefit for veterans that he attended out of his personal interest and commitment. He stepped outside the venue, looking for a breath of fresh air. The bustling city around him was a constant hum of energy, people moving in every direction, some lost in their thoughts, others rushing to their next destination. The cold December air hit his face as he walked along the sidewalk. The sky above was overcast, and the grayness of the day seemed to mirror his mood. He had spent the past few years dealing with the pressures of his post-presidential life, the headlines, the meetings, the controversies, but for a moment, everything seemed to fade as he walked down the familiar streets. As he passed the corner of a busy intersection, he noticed a man sitting on the sidewalk. His appearance caught Trump's attention. The man looked to be in his 60s. His clothes were worn and weathered, his face etched with the struggles of a hard life. His sign read, "Veteran Homeless Need Help." Trump paused for a moment. His steps slowed as he looked down at the man sitting on the pavement. Something about the man's eyes struck him. There was a deep sadness there, a sense of despair mixed with a faint trace of hope. Trump felt an impulse, something that he couldn't easily ignore. He wasn't one to typically stop for people on the street, especially not with the public eye always watching, but today something felt different. The world seemed to move around them in slow motion, and for reasons he couldn't fully explain, he bent down and spoke to the man who introduced himself as Jack Miller, a veteran of the United States Army. Jack shared his story, with Trump quietly recounting how he had served in Vietnam and how things had spiraled out of control. When he returned home, his struggles with post-traumatic stress disorder, his inability to hold down steady work, and eventually his fall into homelessness, Trump listened intently. Jack didn't ask for money. He didn't beg for anything other than someone to listen to him. Jack spoke of the years he had spent alone on the streets of New York City, how he had tried to reach out for help, but had been met with closed doors and indifference. Trump nodded as he heard the weight of Jack's words. The sadness and frustration in his voice were impossible to ignore, but there was something else, a quiet determination underneath it all. Jack didn't want pity. He wanted a chance. He wanted to believe that his sacrifices for his country still mattered. Trump found himself moved by the conversation more than he had expected. Jack's story wasn't just another tale of hardship. It was a story of a man who had given everything only to be forgotten by the very system that he had fought to protect. The two men talked for a few more minutes. Trump stood up straight as Jack continued to speak. He could feel the weight of the moment, the weight of Jack's story hanging in the air like a challenge that Trump couldn't easily walk away from. But as he prepared to leave, he turned to Jack once more and said that he would find a way to help him. The words felt more like a promise than a simple gesture of kindness, and with that Trump turned and walked away. But something in the pit of his stomach told him that this wasn't the end of the story, it was only the beginning. The next morning, Donald Trump woke up early. His mind was already racing back to the encounter with Jack Miller the night before. As he lay in bed, his thoughts circled around the homeless veteran. The story Jack had shared with him played over and over in his mind like a reel of film. The more he thought about it, the more he realized how deep the impact had been. Jack's quiet strength, his sense of being forgotten, his struggle to survive in a world that seemed to have moved on without him. Trump couldn't shake it. It lingered in his thoughts, and it gnawed at his conscience for reasons he couldn't fully explain. There was something compelling about Jack's story, something that felt different from the countless others Trump had encountered in his career as a businessman and public figure. As he sat at his desk that morning, Trump went through his usual routine of checking emails and reviewing reports, but his mind kept drifting back to Jack. The memory of the man sitting on the sidewalk, it felt like a call to action, a pull that he couldn't ignore. He thought about the men and women who had served in the military, who had given so much for their country, and yet so many of them were left to suffer on the streets, forgotten and ignored by the very system they had fought to protect. The more Trump reflected, the more he realized that his own life had been a stark contrast to Jack's. Here, he was a billionaire former president with all the power and influence at his fingertips, and yet this man, Jack Miller, a homeless veteran, had been left to struggle without help or recognition. It wasn't just an injustice, it was a wake-up call that something needed to change. As the day wore on, Trump found himself alone in his office, contemplating what he should do. He had been known for his impulsive decisions throughout his life. But this felt different. This wasn't about making headlines or scoring political points. This was about doing something real, something meaningful for someone who had been ignored by the system that claimed to help him without overthinking it. Trump picked up the phone and called one of his trusted advisors, a longtime friend and associate he had worked with for years. "I need you to look into a veteran's case," Trump said. "His name is Jack Miller, and he's homeless." His voice was calm, but there was urgency behind it. He wasn't asking for a typical donation or charity event. He wasn't interested in the usual political gestures. He was asking for action, real action, to help one individual who had been forgotten by everyone else. Trump's advisor was taken aback by the request. It wasn't the kind of thing he had expected Trump to focus on, but he knew better than to question him. When he made up his mind about something, the advisor promised to look into it and gather information on Jack Miller's situation. Within hours, Trump had a team of experts working on it, from legal aid to medical professionals to social workers. He wanted Jack's life to be changed, and he wanted it to happen fast. Trump made calls to local shelters and veterans organizations to ensure that Jack received the best care possible. And as the hours passed, Trump felt something shift inside him, something he hadn't felt in a long time, a sense of purpose that was beyond politics, beyond business, beyond everything he had done up until that point. That evening, after the plans were set into motion, Trump sat back in his chair, and for the first time in a long while, he felt at peace with the decision he had made. He knew that helping Jack wouldn't solve all the problems of homeless veterans, but it was a start, and that was enough for now. He had promised Jack he would help, and Trump always kept his promises. The next day, as the plans for Jack's recovery took shape, Donald Trump found himself more focused than ever on his mission. He was a man of action, and he knew that when he set his mind to something, things had to move quickly. No more waiting or second-guessing. He was determined to make a difference in Jack's life, and to do so, he needed to use every tool at his disposal. He called in his closest associates, many of whom were veterans themselves, to help build a comprehensive plan. Trump's first step was to get Jack the medical care he needed. PTSD, homelessness, and physical ailments had all taken a heavy toll on the veteran. Trump knew Jack's recovery would not be an easy journey, but it was one that could begin with the right support. He immediately arranged for Jack to meet with top doctors who specialized in PTSD and veteran care. These were some of the best mental health professionals in the country, and they were ready to help Jack face the demons that had haunted him for decades. Trump's team made sure Jack was given priority, cutting through red tape and bureaucratic delays that often kept veterans from receiving the care they deserved. Trump also wanted to take care of Jack's immediate living situation. The shelter he had been staying in was far from ideal, and Trump wasn't about to let him remain in an overcrowded and unsanitary environment. Within a matter of hours, Trump's team secured Jack a clean private apartment, far removed from the streets where he had spent so much of his life. The apartment was modest, but it was a safe space, a place where Jack could begin the slow and difficult process of rebuilding his life. But Trump didn't stop there. He knew that housing and medical care alone weren't enough. Jack needed more than just a roof over his head. He needed a sense of purpose, something to motivate him as he worked through his challenges. Trump reached out to his network of successful businesses and organizations to secure a job for Jack, offering him a chance to regain his dignity. Trump's team also arranged for job training and educational programs to help Jack reintegrate into society. As the plans were set into motion, Trump didn't just delegate the work. He stayed involved, checking in on Jack's progress regularly and offering guidance when needed. He visited Jack's new apartment, bringing gifts like clothing, groceries, and a few simple comforts that most people took for granted. They spent hours talking, not just about Jack's past, but about the future, what could be done to ensure that veterans like Jack weren't forgotten or left behind. The more Trump got to know Jack, the more he realized that this was about more than just one man. Jack's story represented a much larger issue: the staggering number of homeless veterans in the United States, many of whom were struggling with PTSD, addiction, and a lack of resources. Trump knew that if he could help Jack, he could help others too. This became the driving force behind his actions. It wasn't just about Jack's recovery, it was about creating a movement, a push for greater attention and support for the countless veterans who had slipped through the cracks. Behind the scenes, Trump's team worked tirelessly to build the infrastructure for a broader initiative. The Veterans First program was born out of that determination, a nationwide effort aimed at providing critical support to homeless veterans. Trump made phone calls to leaders of veterans organizations, offering his help, his resources, and his influence to ensure the program succeeded. What had started as a personal mission for one man now had the potential to change the lives of many others. As news of Donald Trump's involvement with Jack Miller began to spread, the media storm that followed was inevitable. It wasn't long before the cameras started to show up outside Jack's apartment, and reporters began reaching out to both Trump's team and the veteran himself. The meeting between the former president and a homeless veteran was a story too compelling to ignore, and it quickly captured the attention of the public. At first, many people thought it was a temporary gesture, just another publicity stunt, a passing moment of generosity meant to score a few headlines. But as the days passed, it became clear that Trump's commitment to Jack was far more than just a fleeting act of kindness. Trump didn't just give a speech and walk away. He stayed involved, personally overseeing Jack's recovery and supporting him in ways that were both practical and deeply personal. This kind of attention, especially from someone of Trump's stature, was a rare occurrence. The media couldn't help but notice, and the more they reported on Trump's efforts, the more the public began to question their initial assumptions. For the first time in years, Jack was thrust into the media spotlight. Reporters, eager for his side of the story, approached him daily. He was hesitant at first, unsure how to navigate the attention that was now focused on him. The interviews felt overwhelming, and he wasn't sure what to say. All he wanted was to get better, to find his footing again. But the cameras were inescapable, the questions relentless. Despite the discomfort, Jack knew that his story was important. It was a story that could help others who were living on the streets, suffering in silence, just like he had. The media's coverage, however, was far from unanimous. On one side, there were those who praised Trump's unexpected act of compassion. Columnists wrote about how the former president was proving that it wasn't about politics, it was about people, about showing real care for those in need. The coverage focused on the tangible results of his actions: Jack's medical treatment, his new living situation, his access to education and job training. All of it was proof that Trump was backing up his words with action. There was a palpable sense of hope in the air. People saw the potential for real change and celebrated the moment as a bright example of what could happen when powerful individuals stepped up to make a difference. On the other side, however, critics pounced. They were quick to dismiss Trump's involvement as nothing more than a calculated move. To them, this was an attempt to shore up his public image, to get back into the good graces of the American people after his presidency. Some claimed that the gesture was a well-timed PR stunt designed to distract from his political past. Others questioned his motives, asking why he hadn't done something similar while he was in office. The attacks weren't just about the individual act. They were about the man who had taken it. The conversation quickly shifted from the success of the initiative to the underlying political implications of Trump's involvement. Despite the controversy, Trump remained resolute. He continued to check in on Jack, supporting him in every step of his journey, even as the cameras kept rolling. He refused to let the media frenzy distract him from his mission. It wasn't about defending himself. It was about making sure Jack's recovery stayed on track. He was determined to make a lasting difference in the lives of veterans, even if it meant facing the barrage of opinions and criticisms from all sides. Through it all, Jack remained focused on his healing. The weight of the media attention began to lessen as he embraced the change that had come into his life. But deep down, he knew that his story wasn't just his own. It was a symbol of the countless veterans who were still out there, forgotten by society, living on the margins. As the days turned into weeks, Jack Miller's life began to transform in ways he never thought possible. The apartment that Trump had arranged for him became more than just a roof over his head. It became a sanctuary, a place where Jack could begin to heal both physically and emotionally. The quiet of his new home, far from the bustling streets he had once roamed, allowed him to breathe again. For the first time in years, Jack woke up each day with a sense of possibility. His thoughts weren't consumed by survival or where his next meal would come from. He no longer had to dodge traffic just to find a quiet spot to sleep. There was room for him to focus on something else, his recovery. Trump's commitment to Jack wasn't just a brief flurry of activity. It became a daily presence. The former president didn't just make calls and send money from afar. He stayed involved. He visited Jack regularly, bringing him small gifts like groceries, clothes, and even a new pair of boots. Jack had been without new clothes for so long, and the simple act of receiving something new and comfortable felt like a luxury. Trump would sit with Jack in his apartment, speaking to him like a friend, asking him about his progress and sharing stories of his own life. The two men, once worlds apart, were now connected in a way neither could have anticipated. Jack's health also began to improve. The doctors Trump had arranged for him were some of the best in the country, and they worked tirelessly to help him address his PTSD and the other lingering physical and mental scars of his military service. Jack attended therapy sessions, slowly unpacking the trauma he had carried with him for decades. It wasn't easy. The nightmares didn't disappear overnight, and the memories still lingered. But the process of healing had begun. For the first time in a long time, Jack felt like he had hope. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about living. As part of the rehabilitation program, Jack also began attending job training sessions. He'd been out of work for years, struggling to find stability, and the thought of re-entering the workforce was daunting. But Trump's team worked with local businesses to find Jack opportunities that matched his skills and interests. They connected him with a nonprofit that trained veterans for new careers, providing him with the support he needed to regain his confidence. Trump personally made calls to business owners in Jack's field, advocating for him and making sure he was given a chance. These weren't just empty promises. Trump ensured that Jack was set up for success. In the midst of all this change, Jack began to look forward to the future. He no longer saw himself as a man broken by his past, stuck in a cycle of despair. His life was starting to take shape in ways he never thought possible. He enrolled in a college course on business administration, hoping to one day start his own company to help homeless veterans. The very thought seemed impossible just months ago, but now it felt within reach. Jack knew that his story wasn't just about his own survival. It was about showing others that they could overcome their struggles too. In his newfound stability, Jack became a voice for other veterans who were still struggling, sharing his experiences in local support groups and online forums. He began advocating for better mental health care for veterans, calling attention to the issues that had kept him on the streets for so long. The quiet man who had once sat on the sidewalk with a cardboard sign was now speaking out, using his voice to make a difference for others. Trump's impact on Jack's life went far beyond financial help. It was the personal investment, the belief that Jack could turn his life around, that made all the difference. Jack realized that he wasn't just another case for Trump. He was a man who had been given a second chance, a chance that many veterans never get. And for that, Jack would be forever grateful. As Jack's life continued to improve, the impact of Trump's decision to help him rippled far beyond their personal connection. The attention surrounding Jack's story and the subsequent Veterans First initiative began to gain traction across the country. Media outlets that had initially doubted Trump's motives now had to reckon with the tangible results of his actions. Jack's transformation from a homeless veteran on the streets to a man working toward a brighter future became a symbol of what could be achieved with the right support and care. The initiative Trump had set in motion to help homeless veterans started to grow in scope. What had begun as a personal effort to assist Jack Miller soon expanded into a broader program aimed at addressing the systemic issues facing veterans. Trump began meeting with lawmakers, veterans organizations, and experts in mental health and homelessness, pushing for changes in policy and allocating resources to ensure that veterans received the care they needed. Trump wasn't just interested in helping a few individuals. He was pushing for a nationwide solution to the crisis that had long been ignored. He lobbied for better access to medical care for veterans, especially for those struggling with PTSD and other mental health issues. He advocated for expanded job training programs and for veterans to be prioritized in housing initiatives. Through his network, Trump secured grants to provide funding for veteran-specific shelters and programs. The plan was ambitious, but Jack's story had shown him that even the most daunting challenges could be overcome with the right support. Meanwhile, Jack continued to make progress in his own life. He completed his first semester of college with flying colors, impressing his professors with his dedication and resilience. He had started with basic courses, but Jack had a renewed sense of purpose now, and it showed in his work. He found that he had a passion for business management and hoped to one day use his skills to create an organization dedicated to helping other homeless veterans. Jack's dream was to establish a nationwide nonprofit that would provide housing, job training, mental health services, and a sense of community for veterans who, like him, had fallen through the cracks of the system. He began reaching out to others, gathering support from fellow veterans, community leaders, and local businesses. Jack's story had touched many people, and he was able to rally others to join his cause. The momentum behind the Veterans First initiative grew as both Trump's influence and Jack's personal story spread across the nation. The program wasn't just about housing veterans or getting them medical care. It was about creating a comprehensive network of support that could address the multifaceted needs of those who had served in the military and then been left behind. Through it all, Trump remained a steadfast ally to Jack. He continued to check in on him regularly, providing mentorship and encouragement as Jack worked to turn his vision into reality. The two men talked often about the future, about how they could ensure that no veteran would ever again have to face the challenges Jack had endured. Trump was determined to keep the initiative alive and growing, using his influence and resources to push for long-lasting change. As the years went by, the Veterans First program evolved into one of the most successful and widespread initiatives for homeless veterans in the United States. Thousands of veterans received the support they needed to rebuild their lives, thanks to the foundation that Trump and Jack had built together. For Jack, the dream he once thought impossible had become a reality, a life not only for himself, but for countless others who had once felt forgotten. As the Veterans First initiative continued to grow, the nation began to take notice of the shift in how veterans were being treated. What had started as a single, unexpected act of kindness had become a full-scale movement, and Jack Miller, once a homeless veteran with no hope for the future, was now an advocate, a leader, and a symbol of resilience for millions. His journey from the streets to empowerment had captured the hearts of Americans across the political spectrum, and Trump's unexpected partnership with him had brought much-needed attention to the cause. As the program expanded, Jack began speaking at conferences and rallies, sharing his story with veterans and civilians alike. His once hesitant voice had grown stronger, his words now carrying the weight of experience and conviction. He spoke with passion about the importance of mental health care, access to housing, and job opportunities for veterans who had sacrificed so much for their country. Jack had become the face of a movement that was finally addressing the needs of veterans in a meaningful way. In the years following the program's launch, Trump continued to support Jack's efforts, helping to secure funding, resources, and legislative backing for the initiative. The former president found himself in meetings with lawmakers and government officials, pushing for policies that would prioritize veterans' well-being. He worked alongside Jack and other leaders in the veterans community, determined to create long-term solutions to the systemic problems that had plagued veterans for decades. The push for comprehensive health care, job training, and affordable housing for veterans was gaining ground, and many veterans organizations were coming on board to support the movement. Trump's involvement was no longer seen as a simple PR stunt, but as a genuine commitment to veterans' welfare. His name was no longer just associated with political battles or business ventures. It was tied to real, positive change for those who had served the nation. His partnership with Jack Miller was a testament to the power of what could be achieved when individuals from different walks of life came together for a common cause. The two men, once seemingly worlds apart, had formed an unlikely but powerful bond, and together they were changing the way America treated its veterans. Jack, for his part, continued to rise. With the support of the program, he had built a successful career, moving from job training to a full-time position with a company that provided resources and employment opportunities for veterans. He worked closely with other veterans who were struggling to find their footing after service, mentoring them in the way Trump had mentored him. Jack knew firsthand how it felt to be overlooked and discarded, and he made it his life's mission to ensure that no veteran would ever feel the way he once had. But even as Jack's personal success grew, he remained deeply committed to the cause. He had used his story to inspire others, but his work was far from over. Jack knew that there were still so many veterans out there who were facing the same hardships he had faced, men and women who had served their country, only to return home to a society that didn't know how to help them. Jack's dream of opening a nonprofit organization dedicated to veterans' services was on the verge of becoming a reality. With Trump's continued support, both financially and logistically, Jack was able to secure the resources he needed to establish a national foundation that would provide the same services he had received: medical care, job training, housing assistance, and mentorship. This was the final piece of Jack's journey, the chance to give back to the very community that had given him so much. Trump, ever the businessman, knew how to build a foundation that could last. He helped Jack structure the nonprofit, ensuring that it was well organized and capable of sustaining itself for years to come. With Jack at the helm, the organization flourished, providing critical resources for thousands of veterans across the country. What had started as a single act of kindness had now become a legacy of hope and opportunity for those who needed it most. Years after the launch of the Veterans First initiative, Jack Miller found himself in a position he never could have imagined when he first met Donald Trump on the streets. Now a successful advocate for veterans, he had become a respected voice in the community, someone who was not only shaping policy, but also making real, lasting change. The nonprofit he had founded with Trump's help was thriving, helping thousands of homeless veterans access housing, healthcare, job training, and mental health services. Jack had fully embraced his role as both a leader and a mentor, and his life was unrecognizable from the time when he had been on the brink of despair. Trump, too, had continued his involvement in the program, even after stepping away from the public eye following his presidency. He had remained a steady, behind-the-scenes supporter of Jack and the Veterans First initiative, offering both financial backing and moral encouragement. Their relationship had evolved into a true partnership, founded on mutual respect and a shared commitment to the cause. Trump had helped Jack secure significant political support, lobbying for laws that prioritized veterans' needs, while Jack had become a trusted advisor on veteran issues, often bringing a fresh perspective that resonated with both the public and lawmakers. One day, as Jack sat in his office reviewing the latest reports on the nonprofit's work, he received a call that would change the course of his life yet again. It was from a member of the White House staff, informing him that President Biden wanted to personally meet with him to discuss the ongoing efforts to improve conditions for veterans across the country. At first, Jack was taken aback. He had never expected his journey to bring him to such a moment, sitting in the Oval Office, discussing policy with the sitting president. But it was a testament to how far he had come and how much the Veterans First initiative had gained national recognition. When Jack arrived at the White House, he was greeted with warmth and respect. The meeting with President Biden was candid, productive, and focused on the future of veterans' care. Jack spoke with conviction about the ongoing challenges veterans faced, from PTSD to homelessness, to the difficulties of reintegrating into civilian life. He shared his personal experiences, emphasizing the importance of not just providing for veterans' basic needs, but offering them a path forward, a way to rebuild their lives. Biden listened intently, and the conversation turned to how they could work together, across party lines, to create a comprehensive bipartisan plan to address the needs of veterans on a national level. What followed was a breakthrough. With Jack as a key advisor, the Biden administration announced a sweeping new initiative to reform the way veterans were cared for in the United States. The plan focused on expanding access to mental health services, creating a more efficient and compassionate process for securing housing, and providing financial incentives for businesses to hire veterans. The announcement made headlines across the country, and Jack was celebrated as a hero once again, not just for his personal transformation, but for the monumental impact his work had on millions of veterans. As Jack walked out of the White House that day, he couldn't help but reflect on how far he had come. From sitting on the streets with a cardboard sign to sitting in the Oval Office with the President of the United States, Jack had lived through the unimaginable. But he also knew this wasn't just his story. It was the story of every veteran who had ever felt forgotten, neglected, or abandoned. And through the support of Trump and countless others, Jack had turned that story into one of hope, resilience, and change. Looking back on his journey, Jack understood that his mission was far from over. There were still countless veterans in need, and he remained committed to ensuring that their voices were heard and their needs were met. With the continued backing of the Veterans First initiative and his partnership with Trump, Jack knew that the best was yet to come.